We know them better than they know themselves, but they know nothing about us because they've been too arrogant to look and study us from our own perspective. They can only see us through the eyes which they created for themselves. So therefore, our knowledge of them is supreme and superior, us knowing ourselves much better than they know even themselves, and they know absolutely nothing about us. So when we begin to critique the limitations in their system, we are doing it based on the foundation of a scholarly appreciation for the empirical mastery of their own techniques of knowledge and rational approach. We can understand their world through their eyes because we've been exposed to them, but simultaneously, our hearts have remained true for ourselves. We've been built and grown and founded and based in the very reality of what it means to be African people. We carry within us the very seminal seed of the beginning originators of civilization itself. We are the ones who survived the condition that was never supposed to be survived, and persisting in us is the spirit of the African people that set civilization on its start, is restored over and over again for tens of thousands of years. And we therefore need to beg no one to be a part of the civilized world. We are the ones who were the originators of it, and if there was an Adam and Eve, they were black and they had kinky hair and they had big nose and thick lips and they looked like you. Therefore, we now come to the world to say, as we move to the 21st century, the only hope of humanity is to be able to look at someone who can critique you best and offer you the best possibilities of your ideals, and to be able to take you to the 22nd century with the true recognition of what life is all about. Peace be unto you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, obviously. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes. No, this is fine. This is good. No, this is fine. This is fine. You want to introduce them? Good.
Okay, now Dr. Akbar will be taking questions from the audience.
Okay, I talked too long now, so I can't take many. So let me just take a few so I can go eat. Yes, sir.
How do you feel about African American involvement in the United States Armed Forces?
Well, you see, that's not a question that is even a reasonable question, because I don't mean it's not a reasonable question, because it's sort of like a foregone conclusion. We are involved. Not only are we involved, we also are in positions of potential tremendous influence. So I don't think the question is whether or not we should be involved. I think the question is the question I asked tonight. How should we use the involvement that we have? So should we become the flunkiest for George Bush's administration, or should we as Colin Powell begin to raise some fundamental questions about how to use that power and that effectiveness? Should we not be there, or should we be there to make sure that if they decide to go shoot down black folks in South Africa, we are there to hold a stop from the inside and to shoot them down in the back when they start shooting at our people? You see, so the question is not a question of whether we should be there, it's how to use what we have. And I submit to you that we should very clearly take the kind of stand where we do not permit ourselves to continue to be utilized for the exploitation of other people while using our blood and our brain power to make that happen. So the question is, how do we begin to reconcile the contradictions of the role of defending America while having nothing to do in terms of influencing the policies of America? You see, as far as I'm concerned, if we were going to go to Kuwait, we should have gone to South Africa 30 years ago and begun to do there what we said we were going to Kuwait to do. Saddam Hussein is no worse than some of those Botha and some of them other people who were in South Africa, some of the worst human beings on the planet. So how in the devil can you claim that this man is such a terrible human being, worthy of the whole military power of the civilized world, when in fact you can let that kind of exploitation take place in South Africa without any questions about it? And then begin to do some token changes once the pressures become so intense that the world is shifted without your being able to do anything about it. Then in fact, when in fact you still have not altered your fundamental immorality in terms of the treatment of those people, our people in Africa. So the question is not whether we should be there or not. The question is, how do we use our presence there already? And I think we can begin to do some things again if we make the kinds of commitments that I've suggested this evening to begin to choose how to use that presence. That's all? Yes, sir.
Setting up our own institutions. How would you feel about setting up our own court systems within the black community where we handle our own problems, like the Anita Hill and Judge Thomas,
right?
Something like that. And How would you go about something like that?
Well, there are precedents for that. And I think that we need to begin to consider the possibilities of being able to establish in our own communities sanctioning systems that lets us deal with difficulties that we have in terms of our conflict with each other, which does not require us to serve as kind of like cartoon characters for other people who get their jollies by watching us trip, you see. And I submit to you that the Nation of Islam is an excellent example of that. It had a very strongly developed, very evolved system of justice within the Nation of Islam. And there were no death penalties, contrary to popular belief. That in fact it was a sanctioning system where if your conduct was unbecoming to the objectives of black people, then you were put out. You couldn't receive the privileges of community membership if you weren't acting as a part of the community. So you get suspended when you don't follow the leadership, you don't follow the example, you don't follow the goals of that organization. Marcus Garvey had the same kind of organization within the UNIA. So I'm saying that when we have come together with people who understood the need of defining and organizing ourselves for ourselves, in that was an implicit system of justice where we then remain true to our own agenda. The difficulty in doing that is that black folks believe they can do anything. And then they go to white people to somehow justify it one way or the other. And the point of it is that we will not be able to have a system of justice until there's an agreed upon system of ethics and values that tie us together. Now, please, you see, one of the problems we have is, and I dislike it too, is our confusion with the idea that unity means uniformity. The black community is not monolithic. We have lots of variations. And you don't have to be the same to have the same objectives. And I submit to you that once we appreciate the importance and the integrity of unity rather than uniformity, then we can begin to put together the kind of system that keeps us on the right course. But I think we have to do a lot of work in terms of formulating that kind of agenda, because for right now, we spend most of our time trying to distinguish ourselves from each other rather than somehow understanding the commonalities that we have that can bring us together. So as we become clearer about what our goals are, then the system of justice by which we begin to say you are a part of us or not a part of us becomes acceptable. So the point of it is that, you see, Clarence Thomas used his membership in the black community to get power in the white community. And he does not belong to us. He belongs to them. But his presence there is simply by virtue of his ability to claim connection with us. Now it happened to an extent. We need to do more of it. We begin to stand up around the nation and say, he doesn't belong to us. And that's what we have to do. We have to say, he does not represent our interest. He does not belong to our communities. And other people do that? When Jews run into an anti-Semitic Jew, that person is not respecting the Jewish community. And not only that, Jews have more diversity than any other group of people I know of. I mean, they run the gamut from atheistic Jews to the most holy Hasidic Jews. Ones who don't even go outside the door after sunset on Friday. I mean, that's how holy they are to those who don't even believe in any kind of spiritual concept at all. You see, so they have the full gamut. But when somebody does something that's anti-Semitic, that whole diversity, that whole heterogeneity becomes homogeneous in its goals and values in terms of the preservation of Jewish people. So I'm submitting to you that we don't have to all be alike. We don't have to all be anywhere. But we have to all be very clear about what our agenda is, and then once that happens, we can begin to exercise the kinds of sanctions that lets people enjoy the privileges of being able to receive benefits of being a part of our community. And so when Clarence Thomas gets left out there, as he did at that final hearing, and the white folks started dogging him out, then he expected to come to us. This is a high-tech lynching. Boy, you asked for that. You asked for it. And no one should have gone to rescue him in that whole situation. And the same thing with Anita Hill. I think that she set herself up to be used as an instrument to bring down a black man. And that's what she was used to do. She didn't go there with her agenda. She went there with somebody else's agenda. And she's been paying for it ever since. And the idea of somehow us not being committed to our own agenda first lets us end up being an instrument for our own destruction in much the same way. Yeah. The same thing with the Tyson and Jennifer situation. The same thing. We need to have ways of dealing with those things within our own community to say that we have our own sanctions so we don't end up being kind of a comedy routine for white America. Yes, sir.
They find Americans kind of say all Europeans, all Americans and Europeans say that being blamed for.
I'm sorry, I don't understand. Could you stand up and let me so I can hear you more clearly, please?
Today, you find Americans, European Americans, say all of them are being blamed for whatever just being their prejudice against black. And do you have anything to say about that?
Okay. The question is, there are now many European Americans who are saying they're being blamed for everything that has happened to black Americans. There are also black folks saying the same thing. Shelby Steele, Clarence Thomas, and some of the rest of the neoconservatives. That claim is, it's almost as if they're trying to beg the question, you see. First of all, no one is blaming them, period. It's not a matter of blame, it's a matter of empirical evidence, you see, that the resources and privileges that are practiced and experienced by virtue of being European American is not something that they acquired on their own. It's a legacy which was the spoils of oppression. So the fact that they have access to institutions and resources that we don't have is because they are the recipients of a legacy gained from centuries of human exploitation. Now, I don't blame them for that. If somebody will me something, I take it too. You say, I'm not going to ask where it came from, I'll take it. But the point of it is, though, when someone says you also owe a debt for what you have acquired, when you owe inheritance taxes, you can't argue against the inheritance taxes because there is a price that goes along with inheritance. Okay? So if they have obtained an inherited privilege based upon certain kinds of exploitative resources, then they unfortunately must pay the taxes on that privilege. So no one is trying to take away what they have. One is simply trying to say you can no longer continue to maintain what you've got on the basis by which it was acquired. And it was acquired in a system where there was unfair competition. It was acquired in an arena where your daddy knew the banker who knew the banker's grandfather who took the money by stealing my grandfather's land, you see. So therefore, you are the recipient of privilege that somehow you don't really deserve. So the blame is not that you personally did anything. You simply grew up and got what was given to you. But the fact that you are the recipients of the benefits of a white supremacist culture is something that you just simply need to accept as real. And therefore, the day will come when reparations will be necessary, either now or later. And the reality of it's the same way with the Japanese. Now you see, these people refused for 40 years to acknowledge the fact that, look, we messed up. We put Americans in concentration camps just because they didn't look like us. Took away their property, took away their houses, took away everything they'd acquired. Ignored that they were Americans just like we were. Some of them had been in America longer than some of these recent coming European immigrants. But they somehow locked them up simply because they were in war with somebody who looked like them. No one locked up the Germans in America. And Hitler was the asshole, was the jackass of the world. What Hitler was doing stinks in the nostrils of civilized life. But did anyone go around locking up all the Germans who were in America? No, they did not. They used a racist criteria by locking up people who looked the least like them. So they went locking up the Japanese. When did they decide to apologize to the Japanese? When the Japanese got so much power that they had to begin to respect them or begin to bow down to them. So the apologies to the Japanese came sooner or later, came later. And so Congress apologized and paid up reparations after the Japanese were about to buy Congress out of existence. Now, I submit to you, now see, one of the things you got to understand is that we've been off the plantations now for almost 130 some years. And you know we haven't gotten an apology yet? This nation has not officially apologized for the institution of barbaric slavery yet. No apology. No apology. Not to mention reparations. That hasn't even been conceptualized. So my point is that it is utterly impossible to continue to live on illegally gained privilege without eventually having to come to grips with what that means. And it's not just me. It's like the law of Ma'at. It's the law of balance in nature. This nation has been able to exploit the whole world for generations. Now it's having to turn to the nations that exploit it for its own survival. This nation has built on the most selfish kind of exploitation of the environment of any nation in the history of man. They've cut down anything they could find. They put anything in the water. Wherever they had to have a bowel movement, they dropped it right there. And is the most ecologically unsophisticated nation of human beings in the history of humanity. Even their European forebears understood the need to preserve the environment or to restore the environments where they live. Even they understood that. But this nation, in its greed and materialism, has completely devastated the whole environment. Now, who's paying the debt? No one is asking who's to blame. The point of it is they paying. They dying of skin cancer because they have messed up the ozone layer. I didn't do it. I didn't make no fluorescent spray, spray odes, all that stuff, fluorocarbons. You see? They did that. You see? It was their technology. So the question, no one has to blame anybody for cutting down the tropical rainforest. We all paying for it now. Have winter and summer, summer and winter, hurricanes, earthquakes, you name it. The whole environment is topsy-turvy. So the question, this is such a dumb thing. These people, why don't you ask this question? This bothers me. Now, let me give you an example of the same kind of response. The most politically sophisticated people in America are dealing with America's incompetence by attacking the Japanese for their competence. Now, does that make any sense? Now, here they are making inferior automobiles. America is making the worst cars in the world. They've been doing it for the last 15 or 20 years. Anybody who bought an American car was guaranteed to have it called back in because they left a screw out of something. Or I left half the engine out. I forgot to put the lights on. I mean, stupid stuff. Just stupid stuff. In the meantime, the Japanese technicians were making a better clock. They were making a better VCR. We're making a better microchip. We're making a better Toyota and a Nissan. And people found out that for less money, you could buy a better product. You see. And now people are mad with the Japanese because they're too sorry to put together a decent car. Now, rather than saying this means we need to rethink our technology, we need to rethink our manufacturing, rather than simply saying something must be wrong with our competitive edge that we need to revise, they then start calling Japanese names. They want to get another bomb and go back and bomb the Japanese again, on the basis of the people simply doing what they should have been doing all the time, trying to keep good quality. You buy something made in America, it falls apart before you get it on good. You buy something made in China, it's first rate. So even the vendors who are trying to sell top-rate things go to them to bring those things here. So the idea then of how to deal with the problem is to get emotional rather than rational. So they're talking about you blaming us, you blaming us. The point of it is that regardless of who to blame is, the kind of hypocrisy that has characterized America has lost America's respect throughout the third world. So America has no friends outside of the ones she can buy. No one expects it as a moral nation. That's pitiful. That's pitiful. To be the most immoral nation on earth. And everybody in the world knows it. Everybody knows it. So the question of who's to blame is not the issue. The issue is that if American citizens are going to get respect in the world for generations to come, the only way it can be done is for them to begin to make reparations, to repair the harm they've done to the environment, to the nations of the world, to the economy, and to the very ecological foundation of man in harmony with nature. And unless that's done, there will be no survival for any of us on this planet, period. Simple as that. Let me get the sister here, please.
As you talk about us pulling ourselves together and having our own intimacy, as we look around, we see different things that take place. What are some of the ways you suggest doing that? What are some of the guidelines?
Okay, I sort of laid it out generally. Let me break it down specifically. Everybody needs to be involved in self-study. There's no one on this campus who calls himself literate who should rely upon our state to teach them what they need to know about black folks. You need to have your black bookstores. You need to have a black library. You need to have black videotapes. You need to have ways to study what A.C. Hilliard is talking about, what Leonard Jeffress is talking about, what Ivan Van Sertima is talking about, what A.C. Hilliard is talking about. No one in education should be studying in education and not understanding the whole developments in terms of Afrocentric curricula. No one involved in any kind of economic development should not understand something about the kinds of policies that Tony Brown is talking about and the kinds of models that were established by Marcus Garvey and Elijah Muhammad. No one who is understanding anything about theology can study theology and the change of the church without understanding James Cone and understanding something about the black Christian nationalists and understanding the revisions that took place in terms of the Nation of Islam and the other kinds of religious developments that have come out of our communities. In other words, everybody who considers themselves a student of anything must parallel the curriculum that's being given to them by time being set aside for study groups to begin to apply that information to understanding yourselves. That's number one. Number two, everybody has to understand that they have a personal responsibility to make a service commitment to our own communities. There is not a black person here who has the luxury of being able to exit themselves from the problem. Everybody has a responsibility. If you are a brother who somehow is still sane, you have a responsibility to serve as a tutor or a mentor or somebody who serves as an example for young brothers who are not here. If you are a sister who's been able to make it to be able to be in college, you have a responsibility for talking with young sisters who are going through the ages of 13 and 14 right now who think they can't get an attraction, can't be proved worthy unless they get pregnant before they get out of high school. You need to serve as an example of how a young black woman can in fact be herself, be attractive, be secure, and stand on her own foundations without having to compromise her values and responsibility. And your example in modeling is the thing that makes the difference with that. If you know how to do mathematics, you need to be teaching somebody how to do that. If you are somehow a senior here at Iowa State University and there are freshmen coming in every year, you need to be a part of the kind of a mentor group to begin to let them know how to survive here in Ames, Iowa, in spite of everything else. You need to begin to show them how you survived after you came from Chicago and what you did and how to make that happen. If you're a member of fraternities and sororities here, you need to begin to use those organizations as a device, as an organizational mechanism to begin to change where we need to go. Everybody needs to make a personal commitment to do that. Then everybody has to make a commitment of personal discipline. Understand that you represent us. And you've got a responsibility to us. None of you is an anarchy. None of you can hang out by yourself. You belong to us. Your accomplishments and your presence is a consequence of people who died before you got here. And your presence here is a privilege that has been won by you by hard cost, and a hard price has been paid. And therefore, you cannot claim independence from your responsibility to this community. And at the minute you begin to think you are, you have tripped out, you have gone crazy, and somebody needs to lock you up and put you on medication immediately. That's the responsibility that we have. You see, so I'm saying that every individual must make a responsibility to self-study, must make a responsibility to service, and must make a responsibility for the kind of personal discipline that begins to make a difference. Not join the NAACP, not wait until Dr. Wilson comes or Akbar comes to come listen to what they have to say, but to begin to plan your personal commitment right now. And everybody in here should have an aspiration to not be on anybody's job, but to be able to create a reality for yourself. You can go, the only reason you need to go to corporate America is to learn how they do what they did so you can go do it for yourself. The only reason you need to plan to join anybody's established institution is either to transform it and change it and make it fit your agenda, or to go in there and learn how they put theirs together and go put yours own together. Even though you may have to work on a job for the rest of your life, that should not be your aspiration. Your agenda should be to be in control of something that's going to make the difference for you and for us. So our babies can be different from the babies that we were. And that's the responsibility that everybody has. One more question, I'm out of here. Last one. Yes, sir.
Well, first of all, I happen to read Visions for Black Men. I feel it's very, very good book, very educational. I was wondering about like some of your ideas on black family.
Yeah.
About roles of black men and black women. I noticed that a lot of times people don't know much about it, so I was wondering how you felt about that.
Yeah, I think that it's important that, first of all, I believe that the family is the nuclear relationships that we must form. But my concept of family is not the nuclear system of the European American family. In other words, I believe that we are all responsible for forming family networks. And that is that every woman will not have a biological child. Certainly we are in a situation now where every man and woman will not be married. But that does not eliminate our responsibility for parenting and for husbanding and wifing each other. In other words, the kind of support systems that require us to offer and take responsibility for each other in very real kinds of ways. That is, that uncles and aunts have got to be very responsible for their nieces and nephews if they don't have their own children. Okay? Even if you are a father and you don't have a wife, you're still very responsible for those children. Those are your children. And if you are a man in the presence of a woman who has children by herself, you are responsible to help her father those children. This is not anything radical. This is what we did up until just a generation ago, when everybody in the neighborhood understood their responsibility for the other children there. So I'm saying that cannot change. You are personally responsible to provide big brothering or fathering for any young black man who needs that. You're responsible for being a father image for any black girl who needs that. We have a responsibility to each other as men and women to respect each other at whatever cost. We can't be involved in this constant battle of I got my man and you got your woman. The idea is that we have a responsibility to everybody. We have too many women out there who can't get men because ain't enough left. The war has wiped out so many of us that they simply aren't available. And polygamy is not a reasonable alternative because most of us don't have sense enough to carry on one relationship, much less than carry on one with 5 women at the same time. But that does not mean that we aren't still responsible to be men with those women. Those women have a responsibility to still be respectful to us as men. And therefore, we must work together as teams to begin to make that work. We cannot be caught up in this feminist battle of I'm a woman and I don't need no man. Yes, you do need me, because I need you. And as long as I need you, need each other. Listen. And we must each make that responsibility. I mean, regardless of where we are. So each of us then must vow to do whatever we can to preserve those fundamental relationships as much as we possibly can. It's hard. It's really hard because, you see, to hold a relationship together in this society is at war with every force in the society. The society feeds individualism, it feeds selfishness, it feeds materialism, and it is the most anti-young society in the history of man. This society does not like children. This is an anti-children society. And there's no society that's ever been able to survive that was anti-children. Do you realize that there's never been a people on earth who had living quarters where no children were allowed? Where they would not let people come there if they had families? I mean, like where societies, where people saw it as a burden to have babies? You see, that's how bizarre we've become because people are so selfish. Now, in a society like that, believe me, it is hard to hold a relationship together. When women are taught they don't need men, when men are taught they don't need nobody, then there's no way there's very hard to negotiate that. And then in addition to that, everybody sort of isolated themselves from the examples of the people who survived relationships, so there are no models around anymore, or we don't know who the models are. So it is very difficult. So it's going to involve each one of us taking a personal responsibility to do what we can to salvage whatever kind of decency within our own striving for some reasonable extended family systems and use that as a foundation for building. So I'm encouraging wherever I go, I'm saying to young brothers, look, any child around, you're responsible for it. Like you've got to take responsibility for these young, when I come down so hard on the fraternities, it's not because I disrespect them. The only reason I attack them is because I think they're the most powerful organization of professional black men in the world. There is none stronger. It's an international network. There are alphas and kappas and Qs and sigmas around this planet. And they all have in common a level of intellectual, academic, and skill development unlike any other group of black men on the planet. To whom much is given, much is required. They've got a hell of a responsibility because they are bad. My fury with them is that they spend it in step shows. They should be ready to run the world. And they're around branding themselves and fighting with each other. That's insanity. The sororities, I mean, and as always, the sisters are way ahead, I think, in restoring themselves than the brothers are. Because the Deltas and the AKAs in the front and followed by the Sigmas and the Zetas have been busily saying, look, we are about building black women. And they're into that. And they're doing a fantastic job of it. So I'm not attacking them for the good they're doing. I'm attacking them for those who still think it's a social club, a way for them to dress up, or go to a step show, or try to party, or try to find a boyfriend, or try to find an alpha man who likes a delta, or to be able to find a kappa man who likes an AKA, or to be, I mean, like, you know, that ain't it. That ain't what it's about. It's not about genital play, before or after. It is about mind development. You understand? So family then is that. You know, I mean, like, the most important thing, I mean, even though unfortunately I am wed to and have taken over paternity for our whole communities, the most important nuclear concern of mine are three little Akbars, twin boys of 12 and a little girl who's 14 years old. I mean, all of this is with them in mind. But I understand that daughter has got to marry somebody, and she can't marry those sons. So I got to change the world so she can find her a decent husband. You see, I got to change the world so those twin boys can find them a sister who's going to make them the men who they ought to be, who can be in a network with sisters who share the kind of commitment to higher goals and possibilities that I'm putting in them. So I got to change the world so that your daughters can become worthy of my fine sons, you see. So my commitment to them has required me to spend most of my time on airplanes trying to change the whole world so I can change the things for them. But the foundation of that is primarily my commitment to tomorrow. And they simply symbolize that for me personally. But I see in them every one of the young children in this room and young children all over this world. Because I believe that our future is no further than what we can do in terms of the benefit of the children. Okay, thank you so much. Peace be on you.